Hi, everyone. Thank you. As you're enjoying your desserts, we have a second dessert for you. His name is Professor Sanjay Sarma, and he is the man in digital learning at MIT. He's the first director of the Office of Digital Learning. He's the Fred Fort Flowers and Daniel Fort Flowers Professor of Mechanical Engineering and MIT's first director of the ODL, the Office of Digital Learning. And he's been accumulating other organizational assets at MIT over the past year, which relates to this, including AMPS, which is helping us today with the video. And so he has some brief remarks. He'd like to talk about MIT-X and MOOCs and where he thinks the university might be going with regard to digital learning, both on campus and worldwide. So here he is. Sanjay.
Thank you all. It's a great pleasure to talk to you. The MOOCs have been in the news a lot recently. And I decided not to go with slides, by the way, because my mother used to say, no slides after dessert. It was an etiquette thing. Anyway, whatever you do, no PowerPoint during dessert. Anyway, so I'm going to tell you the story of online learning at MIT. And my story has 3 pieces to it. And I'll sort of tell you the first 2 pieces, and I'll tie it together in the 3rd piece. So let me start with the first piece, which is online learning and how it happened. Now, MIT has had a long history of educational innovation that goes back something like 50 years. In fact, you could make the argument that the founding principles of MIT were disruptive. I'll come back to that. But if you go back 50 years, everything from, or 30 years, Athena, technology-enhanced active learning, open courseware, which now reports into my organization, where MIT decided to give its curriculum away. But frankly, we got a little, what's the word I'm looking for? We became a little smug. We started sitting on our laurels. And so in 2010, 2011, by that time, we'd done a lot of work in automatic tutors, flipped classrooms, et cetera. But, we should have moved faster because something happened out there in the ether that sort of shocked us into action. And that was the creation of 2 startups out of Stanford, Udacity and then Coursera. And Udacity and Coursera were founded to take courses from universities, major universities. They were for-profit companies, and offer them in the format of massive open online courses to the world. Now, just as a quick aside, you see, what is a massive open online course? You could say, well, it's a video. That's correct. Followed by an assessment. The thing that makes MOOCs, the M part, the massive part, possible is the fact that we can, for the first time today, grade assignments, exams, etc. automatically. We could have done videos 20 years ago. YouTube's been around for more than 10 years. But the fact that you can actually grade, and I'm not talking about multiple choice. Today, the technology exists. It's like a distributed robot, right? It's like a robot professor to grade, to use your analogy, to grade differential equations, to grade, believe it or not, an essay, to grade images, to have students write a circuit and see if the circuit is correct, to create a sort of a virtual reality oscilloscope so you can design a circuit and see how it performs over the web. That's the breakthrough. And these breakthroughs that occurred over the course of 15, 20 years after we created OpenCourseWare, MIT did a bunch of the stuff, CMU did a bunch of stuff, Stanford did a bunch of stuff. But we got a little bit, we should have moved faster because suddenly in 2011, these 2 startups crop up. That sort of stuck in our craw a little bit because MIT has always believed in keeping educational assets in the commons. The OpenCourseWare was our big effort there. Today, there are more than 250 universities that are a part of the OpenCourseWare consortium that give their curricula away for free. And so the president of MIT, at that time he was the provost, Raphael Reif, and the then president, Susan Hockfield, got together and said, we can't stand and watch learning get privatized. The great universities around the world are all public, not-for-profit institutions. or private non-for-profit institutions, but they're not privatized. And we cannot be held hostage by private companies. By the way, as an entrepreneur, kudos to Udacity and Coursera, and I hope they succeed because they will serve a certain need. But I'm sort of proud because what happened was a fairly romantic story in technological innovation. Raphael, then provost, now president, pulled aside one of my colleagues, Anant Agarwal, and he said, Anant was the head of the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. He said, Anant, we have these for-profits. Let's create something not-for-profit to take it on. And in December 2011, Anant and Raphael made an announcement. They said in the spring of 2012, MIT would teach its first MOOC to the world. And I have to tell you that they had absolutely nothing, nada, zilch. They had no content, they had no platform. All they had was a hope and a dream. But like Cortés burning his ships when he landed in the new continent, right? They made the announcement so they couldn't go back. And they said they would teach their first course in the spring of 2012. This was December 2011. Over the course of the next 3 months, Anant and all of our great faculty members in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, a number of postdocs, number of grad students worked their tails off. I remember running into a bleary-eyed Anant in March of 2012. He was, his eyes were red. Obviously, he hadn't slept. He was the head of CCL, he was a very senior faculty member. And I said, hey man, how many students do you expect when you launch a MOOC? And I remember him saying, Sanjay, I hope no fewer than 5,000 because that'll be embarrassing. But I hope no more than 10,000 because I will die. So they launched their first MOOC. It was a very esoteric subject, 6002X. As you may know, everything is numbered at MIT. Buildings are numbered, courses are numbered, people are numbered. Dick is number 73. That's how senior Dick is. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But the course is 6002X, Circuits and Systems, a very advanced course. They launched it on time, and they ended up with 155,000 students from around the world. The course, testament to their commitment, to their maniacal energy and their insanity, they pulled it off without a hitch. And when they ended, in all MOOCs, about 5 to 10% of students finish. A lot of people are just browsers. So Anant had taught in that course, I think he had something like 8,000 students finish. He had in one semester taught 4 times more students than he had in his 25-year career at MIT. So we knew we were onto something very big. So true to our commitment, MIT and Harvard struck a deal, and we created a new entity called edX. edX is now a not-for-profit that is jointly owned by MIT and Harvard. It is a consortium of more than 50 universities that includes many of the universities here, includes places like Caltech, Berkeley. Berkeley is a founding member, ETH in Switzerland, IIT, Tsinghua, University of Tokyo, Australian National University, top universities, just Hong Kong universities, HKUST, 55 universities around the world. And edX open sourced its software last June. So you can download the edX software, and you can offer your own MOOC. So edX is up and running. We're very excited by where edX is right now. We have reached about 3 million unique users worldwide. I'll tell you the story of one of them in a second. We have reached 196 countries. Actually, we like to say 196 plus, because there are a couple of IP addresses that we may have discovered a couple of new countries. We don't know, right? We have more than 350 courses that are offered free. Any student anywhere can take it for free. I'll tell you one little story, and then I'll move to part B, and then I'll wrap up with part C of my little story here. There was a young man by the name of Batushik. Batushik was in a country called Mongolia, not a well-served country. Batushik was growing up in Mongolia, and he was an electronics aficionado. He had a little kid sister that lived on a big road, and trucks would rumble by. And he wanted to build an early warning system to warn his sister when a truck was approaching. He was sort of dabbling in electronics, and MIT has one known alum in Mongolia. And somehow they discovered each other. And this known alum persuaded Batushik to take Anant's 6002X. Remember the course I just mentioned, the first running? Batushik took the course and cracked every homework, every exam, Anand was so impressed, he wrote him a letter of recommendation. Today, Batushik is an undergrad at MIT. And there's a New York Times story about him called Batushik, the boy genius of Ulaanbaatar. So that is act number one, which is the story of MOOCs and online education. I sit on the board of edX. As a matter of disclosure, I'm very excited by what's happening. But I'm going to come back in a minute and tell you why it is so fundamental, existentially fundamental to us at MIT. So now part two. Part two is about the cognitive psychology and the neuroscience of learning. Many of you know that in the last 15, 20 years, there have been great advances in our understanding of the human brain. We have begun to understand, for example, how memories form. We know that when we hear something for the first time, we process it. It's a process called encoding. And it goes into short-term memory is a wrong term, but think of it as short-term memory. So it's sort of like a temporary memory, okay? And then it goes into the long-term memory. But we also know that the capacity of the brain before the mind wanders, in fact, there's a whole field of research called mind wandering, believe it or not, is about 10 minutes. We also know that, in fact, if we had to design the worst system for teaching students stuff, it would be lecturing for 90 minutes. Students nod off after 10 minutes. Have you noticed? That's because they are, surprise, surprise, human. Okay? The fact of the matter is that to expect a student to pay attention for 90 minutes is inhuman. And yet, we love to wag a finger at a student and say, why aren't you paying attention? Make them feel like criminals, right? The fact of the matter is, cognitive psychology and neuroscience tells us, and this is such a beautiful socio-technical problem, such a wonderful one, that the optimal time for a lecture is about 10 minutes, number one. Number two, you know how you transfer from the short-term memory to the long-term memory? It's very interesting. There is a lot of evidence that the best way to do it is to do something called retrieval learning, which is you put some stuff in short-term memory, and then you ask questions about that stuff. What the brain then does is it scans that stuff and then redigests it and puts it in long-term memory. That is how learning should be occurring. And that's how Michelangelo learned from his masters, right? That's how, all the great scientists and engineers and Renaissance thinkers and thinkers in the ancient world in Greece, in the Middle East, in China, and India, and Africa, that's how they learned. They didn't go to lectures. They learned as apprentices. Short spells of information followed by discussion and practice, which causes the information to be stored in a way that is durable, but also easily accessible. But yet, our current learning system, which we evolved in the Industrial Revolution, is the antithesis of that. Now, if we had our druthers, what we would do in the way we teach today is we would have 10-minute lectures. But that's impossible. You cannot have 10-minute lectures. You can't, the time to set up a lecture is 10 minutes. So in a very strange way, what has happened with online learning, of course we want to educate the world, is that we have suddenly stumbled, and I think it's fair to say stumbled, because we had a good idea, but we didn't have all this figured out, but we're figuring it out now. We have stumbled on an extraordinary way to rethink the way in which learning occurs on campus. Because now what you can do is you can get your student to take 10-minute online lectures followed by instant assessment, which promotes retrieval learning. Little modules. Now, your lecture doesn't have to be 90 minutes. It could be 10-minute modules, 15-minute modules. By the way, the other thing we've noticed is when you produce a lecture for online, the professor doesn't rant because they have a script. So what is a 80-minute lecture can turn into 40 minutes online. It's also more efficient because the professor sort of stays to the script and delivers what they want to do. They don't have to just, go on and on. Now, when you do that, when a student can prepare before they come into class, and I have this feeling, I was teaching a course on manufacturing a couple of years ago, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I've given the same, we're not on cable TV, same damn lecture 20 times. Couldn't I just put this on video and have students watch it? Why do they have to see me yammering for 40, 80 minutes? So once they've done that, they come into the classroom. Now you have like a dashboard that tells you what they understood and what they didn't understood. You spend 10 or 15 minutes clarifying it, and then the classroom becomes playtime. You build things. You discuss. You do field studies. You discuss cases. You go to the lab. You may travel abroad. In fact, you may finish all your lectures in advance and maybe do a foreign trip, right? You can do you can take your lectures while you're at work, at Google, for example. You can do some amazing things with the time you free up. Many people refer to this as the flipped classroom. Others refer to it as blended learning. It all seems sort of kitschy and sort of, seems like, oh, it's just, the latest fad. But what we're learning is, it is not a fad. This is how cognitive psychology tells us learning ought to occur. What I'm about to tell you is, actually, although we started this only 2 years ago, adoption on campus at MIT has been absolutely amazing. Now, today, 2/3 of our students at MIT, 2/3 of our undergrads, we have 4,300 undergrads, 2/3 of them have already seen the edX platform through their classes. More than 60 courses have adopted the edX platform on campus. So much as you may hear from the New York Times or from the Wall Street Journal about all this great stuff about educating the world, on a plane, how they say, put the mask on yourself before you put it on someone else. This is enlightened self-interest for us. We're doing this because we have started an irreversible and exciting change on campus. We're lucky. We have a lot of early adopters. Dick is one of the pioneers, you may not know this, in online learning on campus. Many of the organizations like AMPS that report to me used to report to Dick a few years ago. We are lucky to have people on campus who believe deeply about this, but the one thing it has created is a momentum that we can't stop. In about 5 or 10 years, we will have fundamentally changed the way in which learning occurs on campus. Lectures will go down, hands-on will go up. Now let me tie it all to a last sort of piece of my story. I want to tell you the story of MIT. And the title of this last section is Back to the Future. All right. So does anyone know when MIT was established? 1861, correct, yeah, 1861. So 1861, the standard, very good, the accepted way of learning was, and I'm going to pick on anyone here from Harvard? No? Okay, good, I'll pick on them. Was the Harvard technique. At Harvard, first of all, to get into Harvard, you had to be white, upper-class, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, male. White, upper-class, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, male. All right? And then you learn science, frankly, while apologizing to the church, now there's nothing wrong with that, by memorizing in Latin. Right? So William Barton Rogers was the founder of MIT. William Barton Rogers, a Harvard man, says, I want to start a university where people, by the way, when he founded MIT, the word technology was about 30 years old. He called it the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was like a slap in your face, right? It was a slap in the face of the system, to the extent that the Massachusetts legislature held back MIT's charter for many years. Okay? So he says, I will form this institution where I will bring in people who work with their hands, who get soot on their faces and grease on their palms, right? Catholics, Jewish people, African Americans, women. And he founded MIT with the principle of mens et manus, mind and hand, learning by doing. In fact, the MIT logo, if you visit the campus, you'll see it next to the coffee shop. It has a guy with a sledgehammer in it. Our first woman student was in the first 10 years. Our first African American student was in the first 15 years, Robert Taylor. By the way, those of you who may know Valerie Jarrett is, Robert Taylor was her great-grandfather, a great architect, right? So MIT was established to bring mind and hand together. It was learning by doing, bring the lab into the classroom. So if you look at the first two things I said, it's actually, I said back to the future. The reason I said that is this is not futuristic for us. In many ways, the history of MIT, the founding principles, sort of, you can feel it. And I'm not an MIT guy. I didn't get a degree here. I got my degrees at Berkeley and CMU. But from the day I joined MIT, I felt it. People have an urgency to go do. Just build it. Just do it. Make it. That's a very deep principle. And the thing we're most excited about online learning is it gives us the freedom to actually reclaim that history of ours. Because frankly, what's happened over the last 15, 20, 30, 50 years, especially after World War II, is as the volume of knowledge has skyrocketed, we have relinquished that sacred territory of MIT, which is the lab, and we have replaced it with the thing we least like to do to our students, which is lectures. And with online, we want to push the lectures back, reclaim labs, so that our students, when they graduate from MIT, can graduate the rock stars they deserve to be. People like Drew Houston, founder of Dropbox, or Kofi Annan, or various presidents and prime ministers in the world, entrepreneurs. We want our students to have an experience at MIT that prepares them to go work with their hands and minds instead of passive animals that are beaten to submission by boring professors. So with that, I think I'll stop boring you and say thank you very much, and all the best for a wonderful conference. Thank you.